Hello, teacher Preston here with another lesson. So we're going to get into our next book, which is Lord of the Rings. So, because I think I did The Hobbit previously, or maybe I didn't. I have to think about that. Anyway, let's get into it. So let me just do my sharing here. So do my share. So, okay, boom. So, okay, so let's get into it. So, chapter 1, a long-expected party. When Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. Bilbo was very rich and very peculiar, and had been the wonder of the Shire for 60 years. Ever since his remarkable disappearance and unexpected return, the riches he had brought back from his travels had now become a local legend. It was popularly believed, whatever the old folk would say, that the hill at Bag End was full of tunnels stuffed with treasure. So where we? Let me just move my. Okay, yes, there we go. Stuffed with treasure, and if that was not enough for the fame, there was also his prolonged vigor to travel at, vigor to marvel at. Time wore on, but it seemed to have little effect on Mr. Baggins. So at 90, he was much the same as at 50. And at 99, they began to call him well-preserved, but unchanged would have been nearer the mark. There were some that shook their heads and thought this was too much of a good thing, and it seemed unfair that anyone should possess apparently perpetual youth, as well as reputedly inexhaustible wealth. It will have to be paid for, they said. It isn't natural, and trouble will come of it. So, but so far, trouble had not come, and as Mr. Baggins was generous with his money, many people were willing to forgive him his oddities and his good fortune. He remained on visiting terms with his relatives, except, of course, the Sackville Bagginses, and he had many devoted admirers. So, okay, let's go to the top. So let me get my pointer and let's go through it. So, a long expected party. So this is a good way to sort of start the book off. Long expected party sort of starts anticipation. So people, when readers read this, they're going to be like, oh, what's going to happen next? So when Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence. So this is basically saying that Bilbo Baggins announced that he'd have his 11th. So it should be 101st, but it's Tolkien sort of tongue-in-cheek, you know, writers have license to play with things. Everything doesn't have to be by the book. 11th has a sort of nice sort of comic quality to it. There was much excitement with with a party of special magnificence. So that is going to be special, but not magnificent, special magnificence. So magnificence, your magnificence, this sort of speaks of royals. So all the who's who of Hobbiton were going to be there. There was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. So all the people were excited. Bilbo was very rich and peculiar. So he had a lot of treasure and he was peculiar. So peculiar is another word for strange. He had been the wonder of the Shire for 60 years. So everybody in the Shire was wondering about him. How did he disappear? How did he get his gold? Where'd he been? Ever since his remarkable disappearance and unexpected return. So remarkable disappearance, in a way, it's sort of talking about that it was unexpected. So remarkable can also be used like unexpected disappearance. And also that it was a sort of noted event, I guess, more noted event. And his unexpected return, and that he came back unexpectedly. The riches he had brought back from his travels had now become local legend. So riches is also another word to talk about a way of describing treasure. So it can be money, can be jewels. The riches that he'd been brought back from his travels had now become a local legend. So legend as in story, that sort of everybody was talking about Bilbo's treasure. And it was popular believed, whatever the old folk might say, that the hill at Bag End was full of tunnels stuffed with treasure. So everybody believed, there were rumors going around basically that all the tunnels at Bag End were stuffed with treasure that he'd brought back. And if that was not enough for fame, there was also his prolonged vigor to marvel at. So, and if that was not enough for fame, so if that was not enough to make him famous, there was his prolonged vigor. So vigor is a older English word, prolonged vigor. So prolonged, to make something longer, vigor meaning longevity, so that he kept going and he didn't age like other people age, basically. That's what they're trying to say. So vigor is talking about, so when you say a person has a lot of vigor, it means they're sort of useful, they have a lot of energy, they don't look their age. Time wore on, but it seemed to have little effect on Mr. Baggins. At 90, he was as much the same as at 50, and at 99, they began to call him well-preserved, but unchanged would have been nearer the mark. So time wore on, so wore on is another way of saying carried on, but it seemed to have little effect on Mr. Baggins, so it didn't change anything about him. At 90, he was much the same as at 50. So imagine that he's 90 years old, but he looks like he's 50. And at 99, so at 100, they began to call him well-preserved. So well-preserved is sort of politely calling it, a polite way of saying it. But unchanged would have been nearer the mark. So unchanged would be nearer the mark, was a way of sort of explaining, all the English way of saying that that's the better word to use, or would have been the better word to use. Better word or better idea, nearer the mark. So I guess when they're talking about a mark on a target, so sort of to hit the nail on the head, if you would. That's also another expression. There were some that shook their heads and thought this was too much of a good thing. It seemed unfair that anyone should possess it. Go down here. Okay, back. Okay. Anyone should possess apparently perpetual youth as well as reputedly inexhaustible wealth. So what this says is that there was a lot of sort of jealousy. A lot of people were jealous, and that somebody should have apparently it seemed have perpetual youth, and reputed. So reputed means to be sort of stated. Inexhaustible wealth means wealth that can't finish. So exhaust, to sort of tire, to come to an end. Inexhaustible. When we see the and plus exhaustible together, it means something that can't finish. Like infinite, without finite, so without an end. Okay. It will have to be paid for, they said. It isn't natural, and trouble will come of it. So this is sort of speaks of times superstition. So this is sort of fantasy. So it's sort of how people were before. When people had certain gifts, a lot of people believed that they were given by sort of sorcery or witchcraft or something like that. So if you got a special gift, you're going to have to pay for it later with your soul or something like that. That's what they're referring to here. And trouble will come of it. So no good will come of it. Basically, that's what they're saying. Okay, so last time, let me get my pointer. Give me 2 seconds. So, but so far, no trouble had come. So they said that trouble would come of it, but nothing had happened. And Baggins was generous with his money. Most people were willing to forgive his oddities and his good fortune. So Baggins was generous. So generous means he gave his money, shared his money with most people. Was generous with his money. So when we say people are generous with their money, they sort of help out family, help out friends, but also they help out the community. That's what I think they're talking about here. So most people were willing to forgive his oddities. So oddities, odd is another way of saying strange. Oddities is a way of saying his strange, what's the right word? To forgive his strangenesses, I guess. That would be, because it's sort of oldie, worldly way of speaking, but it's still pertinent today. So oddities in the sense that it left unexpectedly, left remarkably and come back unexpectedly and had all this treasure, that, and his good fortune. So good fortune means good luck. It's another way of saying good luck. He remained on visiting terms with his relatives, except of course the Sackville Bagginses. So he remained on visiting terms is a way of saying that he could visit his family, but he wasn't necessarily close, what's the word? On close terms with him. So, okay. Then, except the Sackville Bagginses. And he had many devoted admirers among the hobbits of poor and unimportant families. So he had a lot of admirers or people who admired him among the hobbits of poor, so poor hobbits, and unimportant families. So unimportant families mean sort of families that that weren't related to the mayor, or weren't the sort of ruling, they were the ruling strata of society. They were all sort of normal people, butchers, bakers, that kind of thing. But he had no close friends until some of his younger cousins began to grow up. So he had no close friends. So he had acquaintances, he had people that he knew, but he didn't have any friends until some of his younger cousins grew up. So you just close that and then we'll go back. So basically what I'm trying to say is that even if books look daunting, even if they look a bit sort of thick or wordy, it doesn't mean that they're difficult. You just got to sort of break it down a little bit. So tackle what you can. I guess don't start too big too soon. I think you're not going to start reading sort of Plato or Socrates in English or Shakespeare. But Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, actually I'd say start with The Hobbit first before you start with Lord of the Rings, because it's also a sort of simpler language. Yeah, so, but don't be put down by, don't be uninspired by the fact that there's a lot of words in that. Just take it at your own pace. That's all I have to say. Thank you for joining me for today's lesson. Bye-bye, and see you in my next video.